name is Christopher Breedlove, and so real quick, why are we here today? This is the last call in a 6 series that we've done around Burning Man global activation areas. And so it's been an experiment in us bringing in Burning Man community members from across the network involved in different areas, which includes communities, civics, ecosystems, grants, and now this is events. And so I am really happy to be passing off the mic to two amazing people who I honestly am just so honored that I get to work with on a daily basis. Stephen Raspa and Justin Katz, come on up. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm going to introduce myself and set the tone for our time together, and then I will introduce Justin. So my name is Stephen Raspa. I'm Associate Director of Community Events and a founding member of Burning Man's Regional Events Committee. And I'm going to introduce our co-host for the program and our special guest shortly, but let's start with just a little background. So in case anybody's been living under a rock, or as we all likely know, the Burning Man in-person event was canceled this year due to COVID-19. What you might not know is that Burning Man has a regional network comprised of 260 volunteer regional contacts and vast teams of community leaders in 44 US states and 37 countries. And in 2019, this regional network hosted 108 official regional events, all of which were co-created by members of their local community in the spirit of Burning Man's 10 principles. Now, one of the things that makes our style of gathering so special is that co-creational aspect, and that the community brings the content that they wish to experience and share with others as a gift and shared experience. So it's quite the opposite of a usual main stage or traditional top-down produced event. Well, in 2020, just about all of those gatherings were canceled, postponed, or reconfigured. And yet that co-creative thinking and experiments have continued. Regional events began moving online. Blazing Swan in Perth, Australia was the first. Africa Burn followed with Home Burn, as did Playa del Fuego, which became Virtual del Fuego. Lakes of Fire became Lakes in Place. I just love that name. And both Modifier and Burning Seed went online recently as well. In fact, Burning Seed just concluded this past weekend. Recently, we also experienced Burning Man in the Multiverse with 8 virtual universes that were created entirely by members of our community and not by Burning Man itself. There have also been creative ideas for socially distanced in-person events, costumed and safe distance walks and art maps and various things. And communities are finding ways to use technology to facilitate meaningful connections and to be more inclusive and global than they've ever been before. And also embracing some new potentials of these new technology social platforms. At the same time, others are anxious to just get back together in person. When can we get back together in person? But will things ever be the same? And should they? We are here today to share what 2 communities have done to co-create events and stay connected, to consider what the new normal might look like, and ask, are there even better ways to co-create burner events and experiences together in the future? We have 3 wonderful guests with us today to share their community experience and discuss co-created events. But before we introduce them, let's do a little quick poll. Sage, can you please ready the poll question? We would like you to think about what word would you use to describe the future of co-created events? What word would you use to describe the future of co-created events? So.
Actually, Raspa, we're going to have everybody drop that answer in the chat box.
I was just wondering if that was the plan. All right, so I want everybody think of your word and drop it in the chat. They will be magically gathered, reconfigured, turned into a new and delightful thing that we will revisit at the end of our panel today. We'll give people a moment to all get their words in there. I see energizing, digital, inclusive, augmented, all good stuff. Great. All right. While you are finishing up dropping your words into the chat box, I'm going to go ahead and introduce and turn things over to my dear colleague, Justin Katz, who is executive producer of Kindling, which some of you might have heard of, and Burning Man community events. He's also a fantastic jazz bassist and has organized a wide range of really wildly fun and theatrical events of just about every conceivable size and kind. So take it away, Justin. And Justin will be introducing our first speaker.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and thanks everyone. It's really great to be here today. Really feeling really inspired already. So I'd like to start by introducing our first guest, who is our friend Nacho Roizman, aka Papa Nacho. And Nacho is one of 3 current volunteer regional contacts in Argentina. He's one of the founders of the official regional event in Argentina, Fuego Astral, and current board president of their nonprofit organization. Nacho's been going to Black Rock City since 2011 and has experience as a theme camp organizer of Gaucho del Fuego camp, as a temple builder, and has helped lead the Black Rock honoraria art installation, Hispa Text, in 2017. So now Nacho is going to tell us about No al Deprecamp TV, which emerged out of a theme camp in Argentina early in the days of the pandemic, and gave people a simple but effective platform to create their own events and a way to stay connected during this time of distancing. So Nacho, I'll hand it over to you, and maybe you can start by your intro and telling us what No al Deprecamp TV was and the way it worked, and maybe some examples of how the community used this to stay connected.
Deprecamp was a prank camp that registered for Fuego Austral in 2018. By that time, Fuego Austral was mostly a bunch of very happy, hugging, kissing people, and Deprecamp was there to balance out that crowd. They registered the camp. I never built anything except from a depression pit in the middle of the location of the camp. And what they did, it's twisted around everything that was going on Fuego Austral. They have their own principles. Some of them were radical depression, radical intrusion. They promised, and that's when Deprecamp TV was born. Basically, they promised to air the burn of the effigy live, and basically all that was aired was the grass and some white noise, and nothing about the burn itself. They published the Megaphone, which is the only newspaper at Fuego Austral. And after the No al Deprecamp
lies,
it's all fake news. And after the No al Deprecamp TV launch, what we started to see, it's a lot of WhatsApp groups that you were pulled into without even asking. And whenever you left one group, you were put into another group. So that's how the Depreverse was born before the multiverse even existed at Burning Man. This created a network of, I don't know how many groups there are, but it's probably 50s or hundreds of groups. And during the pandemic, what happened is we started sharing ideas and creating some programs that turn into a YouTube channel now, where we have hundreds of videos published from yoga classes, photography classes, cooking, just TV programs about doing house audits where participants agree to have their house audited by the host, and they have to open every single drawer or closet or even the phone, which turned into a Tinder audit for some of the participants. This is basically was born out of the idea of creating one space to share during the lockdown. In Argentina, we're still in lockdown. It's one of the longest lockdowns in the world now. It's over 6 months. And this kept the community together. The way that it was handled basically was anybody that wanted to do one program had the chance to do it and have access to the Zoom. There was no curation of the content, and some of the TV programs even turned into fire chats where people stay late until 4 a.m. in the morning, just staying together. What I brought here is just a sample of one of the programs. It's the Friday night Payaoke. This is a short summary of one of the programs.
Muy alto que está aquí, son las 5 de la mañana. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?
We are the champion, my friend.
That was one of the many programs that we have going on that were completely spontaneous. There was no centralized production. It was all created by members of the community and open for everybody to participate.
Yeah, that's so much different content happening. You know, I'm curious if in that much co-creation, did you need any kind of rules or guidance for the community, or were people able to kind of regulate that together and stay comfortable?
There was basically one rule that you have to, if you want to do a TV program, you have to do it on your own. You have to have your own script. You have to, there was not going to be a team of people helping you or communicating. The groups were open for you to share your invitations. There is one, what we did is the Deprecamp with all the groups open to post. Then we created a group where we only share the links to the Zoom minutes before the program started. And there was also a small group of production, which basically was a place to coordinate at what time each program was going to be, but there was no censorship at all. There was no selection of what content could go on or not. And everybody knew how.
Is this, as our times have changed, is this still happening? Are people using the platform now? What's going on?
Now it's more relaxed what we have right now, but it's yoga in the morning. That I think is the longest going program that's been going on every day. A lot of perseverance there. And we had also gym in the afternoon, which this week switched to 3 times per week. But I think like the first 2 months, we had almost every day something going on, especially at night, where people stay longer. It was just an excuse to get together.
Well, this is great. Before we wrap up, I'm just curious if, can you give us any other examples of the way that your community has gathered safely or stayed connected?
Yeah, other things we did was we had use the Zoom with elderly people to have a connection with people that were alone during the lockdown. We did also a fundraiser to buy face masks for hospital workers. And it's also another collective that we're going to talk more about in the breakout room, but created the One Row Live. It was an online radio with more music and talk show kind of content.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Nacho, thank you so much for getting us started. We're going to pass this back now to Stephen Raspa to take us to our next guest. And then we look forward to chatting with you more later at the end and in the breakouts.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Mockingbird, who is joining us today from Seattle. And Mockingbird has been a regional contact for Seattle since 2014, as well as a BlackRock Green Dot Ranger since 2005. She's also current vice president of Seattle's local arts nonprofit, Ignition Northwest. And Mockingbird has helped create and facilitate several local events and resource teams ranging from Santurkey to the Safer Spaces Initiative, which was formed in response to the Me Too movement in 2017. She's particularly passionate about finding solutions that create connections between real community needs and artistic expression. And Mockingbird is going to share a more recent example called the Seattle Multiverse Actual Reality Trek, which connected the Seattle creative community through a safe, enhanced reality adventure in the streets of Seattle. It's interesting to me because it used very simple technology as a way to begin to bring people back together in person safely. So Mockingbird, I'm wondering if you could tell us about the Seattle Multiverse Actual Reality Trek. What was it and what technology did you use to begin to bring people back together in person safely? You might have to unmute.
Thanks for the awesome intro. Yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I have a few photos to kind of help me illustrate my little spiel. Go ahead and share. All right. Now, it was actually a really fun project for us. It's a self-guided city tour of art, music, games, and as it turns out, baked goods. One of our little mini theme camps that popped up ended up being one of the most popular things there, and it was amazing to see. The technology we used, we were inspired by Austin's Burner Art Safari, which happened in June. They used a really simple framework that we decided to use and kind of implement for our own area. Basically, we created a WordPress site, which is free, and a Google map, which you can also do for free, and put in information for each flag on the map of like what's there, what are the hours, are there any specific rules for whatever you're going to interact there, so that people could make good decisions for themselves about how they wanted to interact. Did they want to just stay in their car and look at some art? Great, they could pick the flags. Did they want to get out and touch something in a safe way with sanitizer and masks required? Great, they knew exactly what they were getting into. It was really nice to be able to put that together for folks. I think that these tools really help people feel comfortable with coming out to see things, because one of the biggest questions that came up for us when we were putting this together was, how do we do this without causing non-consensual harm? You know, and especially with all the things we have to deal with in our communities, we wanted to connect in a way where people felt safe. So that being said, we created this space for people. Folks submitted their stuff and amazing things happened. Art was all over the city of Seattle. Anywhere you chose to stop and look, there was something interesting. This was one of the front yards of someone who offered their space and just put a bunch of their own art pieces out there. Absolutely beautiful work. She had a great time with that. A little close up from some of her headpieces that she was focusing on. There were pieces that were only available at night, or that were seen differently at night. This is Co-Vivid Dreams. During the day it was also pretty, but at night it really shone, I think. This is the pie shoot, the baked goods phenomenon. They had a great time making that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. But they found a nice, safe way to contribute small pies around the people in their community. Lanternio is a beautiful project. I love this one for a number of reasons, one of which is that it was a very easy way for people to just display art that didn't require them to interact with the public if they didn't want to, but just it was something beautiful, and anyone who could just walk by and see that would be touched in a different way. Same here, this was actually right next to the lanterns, beautiful tapestry work. Again, a difference between night and day. During the day, you could take things off the love tree. Oh, I just realized the photo is backwards for the daytime one. Whoops. And then at night, it would glow and light up the neighborhood. A labyrinth, it was obviously close enough that you couldn't be in there with too many people, so good spacing there, but a lot of fun. Even just showing photographs in canvas form. You know, and there was also little bits of paper there to write down as a sort of mini temple to write things down if you wanted to contribute to the space. This was the biggest one. It was an actual theme camp. The photo on the left-hand side is from their musical shooting gallery, where you could shoot foam rubber balls at musical instruments and create sounds. The other three spaces show the way that they were spacing people. These are corrals where they kept people separate. Everything was wiped down between use. You had to register to be there to make sure you weren't crowding anyone. It was a phenomenal space. This is also one of the pieces at Burning Dane where they encouraged people to contribute their artistic talent to an ongoing mural for the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the unrest that is happening here in Seattle currently. And so this piece is on display now, having been finished by the community. This is another piece that was at Burning Dane where you could talk to aliens. This is, yeah, a watched fire pit, a tower to view the art, all spaced and distanced. People were able to hang out, but apart from each other. And this was a hands-on project. They actually handed out little kits where you could print your own signs at home or in the front yard as long as you were in a space that was set aside. All the materials were provided, wiped down ahead of time, and boxed up days before to make absolutely sure there was no contamination. And this one is one of the ones that you can view from your car or come up and touch the odd jelly out. The portal potty, one of my favorites. The photo is hard to see, but it's just a nighttime potty that, anyway, lots of stuff happened. It was a fun piece, but the photos, anyway. Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with this, as you can tell. I'm very excited about it.
What were the biggest challenges that you faced in this kind of a co-creative project?
Honestly, communication was the biggest challenge, and we learned a lot. Not only was it kind of difficult to make sure that people saw what we were doing during Burn Week, so not anyone's fault, like we just didn't think about it that way. But also our original title was augmented reality, not actual reality, and people thought we were a VR event until like a week before. So we had to change the name. So that was part of it. And also there was some confusion during our process about what the safety requirements actually were. So we have much better wording now because we're going to get ready to do it again. We actually just announced our next event today.
Awesome. So
we're going to take the lessons we learned and try again.
You know, I really love how this brings the values of burner culture and the experiences that somebody might have at one of our campout events right into neighborhoods in the city. What were some of the results, or how did neighbors that were not familiar with the culture respond to that? I'm really curious.
It was fantastic. We actually did a collaboration with Ignition Northwest to offer grants for this project as well, and we got some applications from people who have never heard of who we even were. They were just people who saw the notices and decided to try for it. It was really great, and people really connected with their neighborhoods. There's actually a number of Halloween competitions coming up where people who just met their neighbors who built crazy things in their front yard are now like, hey, let's build something together. My favorite example of this is, again, the pie shoot. Apparently someone posted on Nextdoor complaining about the traffic block that was happening because people were lining up for pie. And everyone responded to that thread wanting to know where it was so they could get one. So now they have a bunch of new friends. I'm excited to see that.
One person's complaint is another person's pleasure, right?
I'm really hoping that lady got a pie.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a great way to get to meet the neighbors. What would you recommend to somebody who wanted to start a similar kinds of project? I know you'll have more time to get into that during the breakout session after the main session.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest takeaway for me is I was getting stymied by the idea that it had to be AR, that it had to be online, and that is not something I'm good at. And so I would say the first thing to focus on is this does not have to be a high-tech project. It just needs to be high buy-in. Whatever you do, it's like any burner event, you know, find the people who want to do something they love, give them ownership, and watch it grow. And I think especially with something like this, the tools are so basic and they're free, and people can help you learn how to use them, that you can do anything with this. And so just don't get tied up in the weeds.
Well, I do love how you use very simple technology to begin to point the way back to regathering again safely and responsibly. So I'm sure you'll have a great breakout session later as well, and we'll have questions also. I'd like to reintroduce Justin Katz, who will introduce our next guest.
Great, thank you both. So next up, I'm really pleased to introduce Heather Gallagher, also known as Camera Girl. She is the former head of Burning Man Technology, a designer of mixed reality, virtual and real life experiences, an original creator of the Burning Man calendar, a self-described costume addict, and a dear friend for nearly 20 years. Her story and experiences are manifold and fascinating. So for right now, we are happy to have Heather here sharing some thoughts on what she sees unfolding next with co-created community events. So thank you for joining us, and let's just start with this. You've been part of co-creating events for a long time, And we know that recently you, among many of us, spent time in the multiverse, which was a major community-generated online experiment with different platforms and technologies. And I'm curious what you thought and what did you see and what do you think worked?
Sure thing. Hi, Justin. Hi, Stephen. Hello to so many familiar friends and new friends as well. So great to see all your beautiful faces from all over the world. I'm not certain how many of you jumped into which multiverses, but I myself, I had a fantastic time. I was on an online safari for a week more. I mean, I think we have to first recognize that even the fact that 9 or 10, depending on which ones actually finally got across the finish line, platforms of that sophistication and complexity with that much content that was created by community members, you know, out of their love for Burning Man, the fact that that many things surfaced in themselves is a real triumph. You know, knowing what it takes to do technology and some of that sophisticated technology, by certainly, if you meet anybody who is behind all that, give them a lot of thanks, because much like many of us who've been producing in-person events or the Black Rock City event or regional events, it's a similar or comparable amount of effort to do it digitally and then some. So that in itself is a wonderful triumph. I got to personally dive into pretty deep into about half of them. There's maybe 1 or 2 I'm not certain that they ever even really opened, but that's okay. That's the Burning Man way too. And you know, and it was, I saw things that were hitting the mark for being Burning Man experiences. And after 20 years on the fly, I think I know a Burning Man flavor when I feel it. But we saw, you know, true connections, met new people, honest to goodness, random playa synchronicity that of course wasn't random, newbies, people, first timers, who were just rejoicing in what they were finding, first timers who had contributed content without even having done a Burning Man thing. And at some point, a lot of us were looking around, potentially flying around a virtual Black Rock City going, this is kind of ticking a lot of the boxes. You know, I mean, of course, we'd love to hug each other in person, and that is going to be a preference for always. But here we are, different circus, same clowns, you know, instantly able to make this situation funny and hilarious and have honest to good playa adventures or Black Rock City flavored adventures. Another very important thing that worked was that there was lots of different platforms, lots of different multiverses, so that people could plug in with lots of different technologies and ways that they felt like engaging. So not, it wasn't one size fits all, and that's important because it's not one size fits all for the technology. I could go on and on, but.
Well, no, I think you bring up some good things. Like I was similarly surprised at how many of the important experiences were mirrored in these platforms or represented. And at the, might have frozen here. Might have frozen there, sorry. And at the effectiveness of a digital hug.
Yeah, I appreciated your digital hug a lot. That was one of the first ones. We kind of like a little avatars hugged each other and we're like, this is oddly satisfying, actually. Yeah. And it's helpful that we have a context and a relationship and experiences to draw on. So we were not necessarily just starting from scratch. So we have hugged. You know, I think that that's something to take forward.
Yeah, I mean, this was a new experience for many, if not most people. What did you think of in terms of like challenges or any risks that we took as a community and as a culture going into this online space?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because I was happy to see on at least any of the multiverses and things that I visited, we didn't see some of the things we had seen previously in some persistent Burning Man online places. I'm speaking of like a decade ago, we had to give the e-ply a timeout because there's a dark side to radical self-expression and the internet can be a challenging place. And I didn't see any trolls. I didn't see anything that made me uncomfortable, anything that I didn't think was family friendly. And that could have been the fact that it was a time boxed experience, you know, and that everybody was just enough to kind of figure out the techniques and the devices and the logins and the avatars and the platforms, and then to find your friends. So nobody had enough time to really get into too much, trouble besides the good kind of trouble. I think a lot of the platforms did a really lovely job of trying to get people into what the culture and the experience is to be a burner. But setting expectations as more and more people can join, that this isn't broadcast television polished show, though you guys are doing a great job, of course, and that it's DIY. And so some people might show up expecting this, you know, something that they see online to be super produced, and we're super DIY produced, and that is sort of the joy of it. So, you know, how do you acculturate people? How do you set their expectations for that they need to also contribute? And then how do you make sure if they're doing these kind of things or staying plugged in for longer than just a small period of time, how do we keep the positivity instead of some of the downsides of expression that we've seen previously?
Well, yeah, I mean, that really captures a lot. And, you know, you are working with and have been working with a lot of different technologies for quite some time now. And would love to hear about what you see emerging and what's exciting and what kind of tech capabilities are going to be offered in this context of co-created events.
Sure. So, I mean, you guys, what we saw in the virtual Burning Mans and even now with my little instant costume changes and things like this, and immersive virtual reality adventures, we are scratching the surface of what is possible right now and coming online with technology. Of course, some of these are my favorite parts. You know, so I spent the last year creating immersive, interactive 3D holographic playgrounds, you know, where you could walk around and explore things and, you know, and touch things that weren't really there and have them respond to you. There are people right now who are doing real-time live volumetric capture of performances, and then they are able to rebroadcast those into virtual or real environments. I mean, I know people who are literally working on how can I make a hologram show up in your hands. Now, this sounds like science fiction, and for many, many years it was, but these things are coming, and they are coming online. And right now they are not adopted by, you know, widely adopted by consumers or regular folks, but they soon will be. And much like a new kind of tool or the internet and these remote things are you know, places where people have been creating, these new tools and these new capabilities are absolutely things that creative people are going to embrace, especially burners. I mean, you know, look at LED lights and L-wire and lasers. As soon as something gets polished enough in maybe a big production, a Hollywood space, burners find a way to sneak it into what they're offering to the community. And that will not be any different in online, remote, or even in-person experiences. And Lord knows I'm glad, because I love those lasers.
I really liked what you said when we were chatting the other day about how some of these technologies are allowing us to feel actually more present. That, you know, I just, maybe before we have to move to the next segment, you could share a few words about that.
Sure. So like virtual reality and what I was working in, immersive augmented reality, and these tools, these are called spatial technology. And this is technology that lets you engage with content in a 3D environment. Either you bring 3D content into your real world or you go into a 3D world. And the tools and the headsets, and yes, I get they're a little goofy and expensive, but you know, they're going to keep getting better. They're going to keep getting better. But this technology is now letting us engage with our whole human being, to be immersed in information, to be immersed in a creative experience, to use our hands, our eyes, to walk around, to give each other little avatar hugs. And it's really rehumanizing the human-computer interface. And so these are really going to then affect how we can have creative and connective experiences, hopefully in a more humanistic way.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities of the things that we can become, you know, when we just are willing to try things out.
True story, Justin.
Thanks. So I think we're now going to turn this back over to Stephen Raspa, and we're going to move ourselves into another round of questions for our guests.
Yeah, well, thank you for that really interesting conversation about technology and where things are going from your perspective, Camera Girl. I'd love to ask our other guests, where do they think that the future of sort of co-created events are going from their perspective? What, you know, what do they think the future might hold? Let's start with Mockingbird and then go to Nacho.
I think that projects going forward, at least for the foreseeable future, are going to be a little less about the party and more about the community. I think that a lot of people right now are turning more inward and finding ways that they want to share to express themselves, achieve catharsis, share experiences together. We're in a very quickly changing world right now, and I think our communities are going to be reflecting that in the way they choose to gather.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Nacho? What's on your mind when you think about the future of co-created events? Where might things go?
I think the key is to have the first experience of a co-created event, and it's a transformation where people realize what they are capable of doing. Most of the times you see people participating as spectators, and once they have the chance to be close to somebody actually producing something or building something, they realize they can join and they can even create their own project. So I think a lot of the future depends on that, how people are exposed to these kind of events and get together to continue that evolution.
I forgot to mention that now would be a good time also for anyone who is with us on this call. If you have questions for any of our panelists, any of our guests here about the topics covered or related questions, please drop them in the chat and we will work through as many of those as we can.
Yeah, Justin, if you could help me sort of harvest those as they come into chat.
I will
But this is a perfect time to open things up to questions of other listeners out there. And in the meantime, I would sort of throw out to each of our panelists, based upon what you experienced either with the multiverse or other platforms, do you see a particular kind of technology really suiting the style of our co-created events better than others? What sort of stood out for you as sort of capturing something that is really open for the community to create what they want to create, or to have really human, meaningful connections? What really stands out for you? Because there's so many different technologies right now, and we just got to experiment with a whole bunch of them. Anybody want to grab that one?
Stephen, I'll say one of the qualities that stood out for me was the platforms that enabled connectivity, if you wanted, right? Sometimes I didn't feel like, being on camera, and I was happy to just watch some videos. But the true moments that reflected the Burning Man qualities and the connections were places where I was able to connect with others. So even though it's fascinating to run around a digital version of, a Black Rock City that's cool and I can look at art, it was where I could maybe have a buddy or meet other people that really, to me, that was the threshold that made it feel a more valuable experience to me.
Mm-hmm. Nacho, is there anything that you had a chance to explore? Like, what technology do you think maybe is particularly suitable to co-creation?
I don't think of a particular platform itself, but I think it's something that allows the balance between something that it's going to be publicly available on the internet or open to everybody, and the ability to choose when to go private or in closest to your group of belonging. Some, like going to YouTube, it's one extreme, and going to a FaceTime on a one-on-one chat on WhatsApp is the other one. We found on Zoom was a good way to do something for 20, 30, 50 people that could share and spend like if we were drinking something in a bar together.
Mm-hmm.
I saw another question here for Nacho while we're talking about this. The question from Christian was your community especially creative, say, regarding TV and video content, or did you give any kind of seed or spark ideas for something to get it flowing? And I think the observation was saying here in Vancouver, there were some ad hoc events which people created, but people's creativity might have, petered out, or people got tired of the Zooms after a month or so. So I think that's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah, it was not particularly creative in terms of TV or editing content. It was mostly about who was participating. The programs were the SKUs. It was a way to get together with the people that we know. We were coming back from Austral about 20 days ago, so we were feeling that need to get together after a burn. And I think that everything got together. The pandemic, the Depreverse with all the groups where we were already in contact, and the ability to be face to face and talking to whenever we wanted and spend all night together.
I see one for Mockingbird that's in the chat. Did you have any funding for the art? And if so, what were the sources?
Yes, actually, our local arts nonprofit that works to fund and produce a number of our burner events, Ignition Northwest. We may have had to cancel all our fundraisers for this year, but we still had a small pot of money set aside because we felt it was important in the beginning of the year when we were really talking about this to have that available so that people could continue to contribute and find their expression. So we opened a grant cycle and people applied, and it was great. We actually ended up funding roughly $1,500 in local art projects, including, for a couple of them, it was specifically to give them a chance to reach more people. The sign makers, for example, asked for a grant because they wanted to create kits for, you know, dozens more people to be able to take home rather than just a few that they had already funded out of their own pocket. So there were many examples, but that's just one of them.
That's really great. I'm glad you were able to continue to give art grants. There's one challenge in our community right now is the lack of funding, since so many of our community events have been canceled for the year. I see a question here from Dave X. Now that there are all of these virtual worlds, such as BRCVR, how do we then blend them into real spaces and events? Do we have spaces within live events where event participants can see into and interact with the VR world? And he goes on to ask, can there be telepresence, such as the ability for VR participants to make a real action, such as a button push happening at the actual physical event that activates something? How can we let these two spaces overlap?
I can speak to that because of course I've been thinking about this. It's a great question. I mean, on behalf of somebody who's produced, the technological infrastructure for Black Rock City for almost 2 decades, I can tell you that the kind of connectivity and bandwidth that was needed for all of us to be able to plug into the multiverses is not available to that scale to participants live in Black Rock City. It's just not practical or financially logistical or feasible today, right? Or probably in the near future. But finding the right place to weave the things together, because these platforms are now basically their own regional events, and if not enough people can get tickets to an event, then maybe these things can be a mirror event happening and a great alternative, for various reasons. But there might be things where maybe a few camps at a live event have a VR room, or maybe certain elements are broadcast back and forth, and that the delicate weaving of the meat space, as we like to call it, and the virtual spaces together is going to be really the fascinating aspect to when and how and why and how much. But I don't think there's any way to put the digital genie back in the bottle, nor do I think we should, because it's so fun. But we also have to look at the practicalities for what it takes to have that kind of remote connectivity, and does that make sense for the in-person events and how much of it?
There's a really good question here that really relates to this tension between complete radical inclusion and accessibility and providing a place where people are committed to operate based upon the principles in a principled way, a safe space, if you will, for people, or at least an encouraging one. So there's a question that I would love to throw out to anyone that would like to answer it from Max. How does being virtual facilitate or otherwise affect the Me Too issues of unwanted attention or advancements? And the flip side of it, like, how do you potentially maybe offer better modeling for how to offer ourselves or not? But there is something called, like, I don't know if it's like being a creeper, like stepping on somebody's avatar is a thing already in the gaming world, that you don't do that. There was even a function in BRCVR that you could automatically put a force field around yourself to create a safe space. So that is a real thing. I'm wondering, Mockingbird, I know you have experience with Green Dot rangering especially, and I know this is something you care about. What do you think about that, and what comes up for you around that question?
It's kind of interesting as you were talking about it, because not only do I have it in my mind the way that you just phrased it, but I'm also a gamer. And so I've got decades of dealing with this, even before any of Burning Man even happened. It's definitely a real thing. One thing that I really appreciated about BRCVR was that they did give you options, like you just mentioned, to be able to control your own space. And also the Multiverse Rangers, I think, did an amazing job at the events where they had actual virtual ranger shifts, where if somebody was just not able to get away from someone that was that had behavior that needed some education, then they were there as a resource as well. So thankfully it wasn't a major problem as far as I know, which is fantastic. But when things did happen, there was someone there to help out. And I think that as we move forward in this space, having, like any other burner event, having a resource like that, someone you can talk to if your ways of controlling your own environment are not helping you with what you need, that's a fantastic first step. Knowing that you can ask for help, because speaking as a gamer, if people find out that I am a female identifying person, things get really Wild West for me, but there's never anyone to ask for help. And one of the things that I really appreciated about all of the multiverse offerings is that there was someone you could ask if you needed to. So it's absolutely doable. It's going to take some work, but I love that there are people who are here for that conversation. That's a big first step.
Yeah.
I was just going to note that is an ongoing part of what we're referring to, of the co-creation of the events. They're not just co-created programming or co-created experience, but we're really putting the effort as a community into co-creating the full structure and experience, including the support systems for each other. So I think that's really wonderful to be addressing.
And events, are really spilling over more and more to community emotional support right now at a time that is very, very challenging in the world. I was very, very proud of the rangers, regional rangers, becoming digital rangers and teaming up with mental health support and other groups and diving into all these multiverses to really offer support. And I think that that's something that really is exemplary. I think that, it's serving a very vital and important public need now that goes beyond just an event as a discrete experience cut off from the rest of reality. I'd love to, while we have a little remaining time, go back and ask each of you, and I think I'll start with you, Nacho, and then go to Mockingbird and on you, Camera Girl. But what is next for you in your local community or personally? What do you have on the horizon that you'd like to share with people at home?
Oh, next, we just rented out a 6,500 square feet warehouse in Buenos Aires to make our own makers club Fuego Austral all year round. We just got it about 3 weeks ago and starting all the work on it, electricity, water, gas, everything. So that's going to be our big project for the next at least 3 years, which it's the least that we have.
That is amazing. So you'll have a burner community space in Buenos Aires.
Yes.
Fantastic. Mockingbird, how about for you and the Seattle community?
We've got a lot coming up, but I'll try and keep the list short for interest of time. The immediate next step is our next art jaunt, which is we actually just announced today, right before this meeting. Save the Magic, a Halloween art jaunt. We're going to take the lessons we learned and do it again for Halloween weekend. We're also starting to begin talks about a post-holiday drive-in event inspired by Summer Spark in Rancho Cordova. Still working out some details on that, but it's going to be an interesting foray into a space that we haven't tried before. We're also really excited to talk that we're still in talks about a collaboration with a local city arts commission about creating rotating regular art installations that have burner art in them, distance performance events that we can contribute to. I'm really excited about a potential art car food truck partnering for a day in the park. These are all really for low level, like we're still talking about it, but it's an exciting thing to talk about. And regarding the smart style art jaunts, we're actually making that a permanent event in the interest of inclusivity, even when we're done with the distancing thing that we need to do right now, because there are so many burners who can't make it to the burns due to finances, getting time off work, medical issues, whatever. The feedback we got from this event was that people felt like that this was the first time in years they've been able to contribute to being a burner again. So we took that to heart, and we're going to keep doing it, even when we can do the large scale stuff again.
That's amazing. Hats off to Seattle and your community. You've always been very active and always doing wonderful things. How about for you, CG?
Sure. Interestingly, personally, I'm actually taking some time off, so I'm going to get my digital costumes organized while I figure out my next adventures. But I will say some of the places I'm probably going to get into have to do with the intersection of these immersive technologies and events. How do we design for humans with all these different levels of interaction happening with the physical and the technical, and also getting into transmedia storytelling. So much like these events now, the combination of remote and in person, or stories that unfold across the digital mediums, and that could be everything from social networks to YouTube videos, to immersive technologies, to augmented comic books, and helping people birth story worlds across a bunch of different mediums to tie together to help hopefully tell some good stories to the masses. Other than that, I'm waiting to see what part of you guys invite me to next.
Well, I have a feeling if it's any good, you'll be there or involved in some way. I see one other question, which I think might just convert into a comment, one that, that raises the question about digital equity. On the one hand, I had, by the way, wonderful experiences in the multiverse with people that were physically unable to go to in-person events. In one case, there was somebody who was a extremely limited mobility person and just could not even go to something like that. And someone else that was had other health issues, so it increased accessibility. At the same time, it's pointed out that there's a cost to some of these things. To buy some of the technology to have a fully immersive VR experience, can cost hundreds of dollars. So there's a good question really raised there about the right balance and accessibility, even as events are becoming more global using these new technologies, how to keep them accessible and inexpensive, or create things like shared VR hubs where people can have access to the technology. So that's maybe just a good thing to keep in mind, that even as it's exciting to have these things be more and more global, we can't forget people that don't have access to expensive technologies, or potentially even to technology itself. I want to go back to what we started with, which is our results of our survey. So Sage, I'm wondering if you could share with us the results of the earlier survey, which was taken off-site, tabulated by elves and very helpful technicians, and turned into this. Word cloud of experiential DNA. Global, fun, global, people, anti-colonial. Okay, I love that. Decentralized, collaboration is a big one. Collaborative, curated, inclusive. Blockchain is in there, and fractals, and flexible, physical, inclusive, immersive, multidimensional, exponential, wonderful, responsible, energizing. People. Global's big. All good stuff. Interlinked, warm, creative community, augmented, underground. That's an interesting one. We could probably do a whole thing on underground versus accessibility through technology. Responsible, reconfigured, energizing. And give you all a chance to kind of scope out this thing as well. This is being recorded, and so if you want to go back and revisit these things, you certainly can. I don't know if anybody's thoughts about the feature changed at all, or if this was just a good opportunity for all of us to think about, okay, where are we now, and where do we go next, and how do we really do things in a way that is co-creative and continues the spirit of our gatherings. I want to make some thank yous, and then we'll go into breakouts. So first of all, thank you to my co-host, Justin Katz, and to each of our speakers, to Mockingbird and Nacho and Camera Girl for joining us. Thank you as well for our behind the scenes Burning Man civic activation team members that have helped to organize this call, including Sage and Christopher and Tranquility and Laura. thanks to all of you for participating and being a marvelous audience from home, and as well for pranking and adding some spice to the mix and program today. And thanks to everybody for continuing the experiment of this kind of co-creation in the future of our culture together.